All right, welcome back to another episode of Travel Ball Talk. I'm your host, Rich Prado, owner of Play in School. Today, we're heading down to Orlando to talk with Brian Dempsey, director of Power Baseball. Power Baseball, pretty new to the game here. I remember when Brian started this up just a short, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago. So I'm excited to get the updates. Power has become, one of those juggernauts out of Central Florida. So, Brian, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Man, doing great. I appreciate you having me.
You got it. It's been too long since we talked, so I'm glad we're able to catch up and have this private conversation with that nobody will listen to. So perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe my mom will tune in. Hopefully, maybe some of your family members too.
No doubt.
So when I first talked to you, you were just starting Power. Maybe you guys have been up and running 6 months, and now you guys are putting together some pretty strong teams every single year at a bunch of different age groups. So well done. Kudos to you, man.
No, we appreciate it, man. And a lot of that really came from, honestly, is, I'm here right now as a representative of the owners, but it definitely is not solely me. So one of the things that is a little different with us is, we actually had, 4 founding, owners of this organization, right? And myself, Eric Lassiter, Jesse Marlowe, and Tony Mielik, right? So we were kind of the 4 founding owners and directors of this. And, there's a lot of pros and cons that come with anything, especially when you have 4 chiefs, right? It can definitely get a little difficult internally, right? Just kind of, it's almost too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But the pros that came from that is, we were just starting a travel ball organization, even though the 4 of us, had a combined of over 40 something years of travel ball experience. And then, Eric was actually a recruiting coordinator in college for 5 years. So, the resources and connections and networks of college coaches, pro scouts, agents, and then just players within, our 90 miles of where we kind of live here in Central Florida. We had all those, but then to kind of bring it together under a new brand, right? It really took all 4 of us for kind of our, so-called, whatever our specific superpower or connection or network was to bring it all together to make it something that we were able to kind of go out there. When you start a new brand, a new anything, kind of a first impression is a lasting impression. So we knew that we had to have some quality teams. And if it wasn't for all 4 of us, and, kind of banding together, we wouldn't have been able to have the solid start that we had, and that was probably the biggest thing as we've come along, is learning how to internally, kind of have 4 chiefs running the show, right? And that is anybody that's ever started a business or even been a part of any level of team, have 4 people that are kind of at the top. It is a lot to share, but, we have been very fortunate that over the first 5 years, we've been able to kind of navigate those waters internally. And, it's honestly for us, it's been really honestly humbling and just a phenomenal experience that I can't believe it's been 5 years. But in the same way, it really kind of, it has been a lot that has happened over that short 5-year span.
And to repeat, along with yourself, I'm on your website now. It looks like Tony, say his last name for me. Mielik, Jesse Marlowe, who I believe I've met Jesse, and then the 4th is Eric Lasser, and I believe I've met Eric. Those names are very familiar. Those are the four guys at the top of Power Baseball with yourself.
Yeah, those are the 4 founding owners. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I tell you what. Why don't you? You gave us a quick bio on those guys. Why don't you give us your quick bio?
Yeah, I actually am sitting right now inside of Turn 2 Sports and Performance. This is actually, a baseball training facility here on the west side of Orlando. And then, I've, done a little bit with all those other guys in the past. I actually coached at Apopka High School with, Eric Lasser, as he was the head guy there for 6 years, which is also his alma mater, which is an incredibly storied program. Guys like Zach Greinke are notable alum at places like Apopka, and it's kind of a perennial powerhouse here in in, Central Florida, which is probably, one of considered the hotbeds of high school baseball in the entire country. So, I'd worked together with him, in those capacities. Me and Jesse had kind of coached against each other as he was the head coach at West Orange, which is, a perennial, top 10 USA Today high school baseball program in the country. So we were kind of rivals, kind of competing against each other. And then we did get to kind of work together as well, especially within his youth organization, which is, directly does feed into Power baseball, because with Power, we only have, 15, 16U and 17U age teams. We kind of stick to high school only, but Jesse owns Team Orlando, which is, has teams from 10U to 14U. So kind of in that youth travel ball market. So I had kind of had a young group of guys, which now those are our oldest guys that I was able to kind of have from 12, 13U and 14U. And, I was able to kind of work with Jesse and do that under his team umbrella, Team Orlando umbrella. So that's kind of where the biggest way to kind of say what I've done and, kind of the pieces on how it kind of led to all of us working together with Power.
I can imagine that having the Team Orlando relationship with Power is just a huge positive for y'all. Now, I would assume that you're not getting 100% retention. People, head other directions for all kinds of different reasons. But the fact that you don't have to go out and recruit 100% of your players at the 15U age group, it just makes your life so much easier.
Yeah, there's no doubt, right? There's a lot of good things with it. And here's the thing, right? Like, not only is it our, we at Power not going to probably retain 100% of the Team Orlando, right? I mean, I kind of usually believe in the idea that anybody that tells you're going to get 100% of anything is usually 100% full of BS,
correct,
right?
Correct.
Very little in my life that I've ever received 100% of anything, right? So, but also it's in the same way to where, like, Team Orlando and Power are separate because there's a reason why they're different brands, and they are the youth travel ball and high school travel ball are incredibly different. About the only thing that is the same is that they're both travel ball. And that's one of the things that we really try to pride ourselves on, is like on the education side of things, of like getting them to realize that like what is maybe is accepted as normal or, just deemed acceptable at the youth age groups is kind of like a cardinal sin or a no-no at the high school age. Right. So with that, too, so not only do maybe we not retain because maybe they don't decide to try to play for Power, and that's fine. That's their own prerogative, and players need to do what they feel is best for their own career. But it's also it goes both ways, right? Like sometimes just because a kid
you don't keep them just because.
No doubt. Right. And that's another thing. Is like we really try to keep the integrity of our tryout, right? And like the numbers that we have to back that up is that like, look, right, like, Eric Lasser is the head coach at Windermere High School, one of the most, talented high schools here in Central Florida. We have 12 teams this summer. We have a bunch of Central Florida high school coaches. Every year we have had kids that go to maybe even Lassiter's high school that have gotten cut from Power. We have had kids that have gotten cut from a tryout, come back, make a tryout another year. We've had a kid be in our program, get cut at a second tryout, and then make a team again at a third tryout. We've had a kid go from being a PO to a two-way player back to a PO. We've had players go from two-way to PO, right? So like literally every single situation that would basically put, is this a true tryout to test? Like we have actual data backing that up, that like, look, we get that weekend and it's a short sample size, but we're always going to consider the largest sample size that we have, but that weekend does matter on how you perform. Guys have moved up and down teams. The rosters have changed every single year. I don't think we've ever had back-to-back seasons to where a roster stayed exactly the same with no additions or subtractions, right? So that tryout is super important to us, first and foremost, to hold the integrity of it.
Now, you guys, the name of that facility escapes me. It's not the one over in Vero, is it? Where you do that, the big tryout, or do you do that in house at your facility?
So the way we do it is Friday night at Turn 2 Sports and Performance. We do the bullpens here, right? So it's indoors, right? We have the luxury of kind of, having this as a resource to kind of control weather, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
So Friday is really for the pitchers, we'll call it, right? And then Saturday we do it's for the position players. So there's BP, there's a pro style workout, there's a 60, right? So it's good to see them show their skills in a more controlled setting. And then Sunday is modified live games, right? So it's a 1-1 count, right? 5 hitters per inning. Each pitcher faces 5 hitters, right? Anyone that wants to try out as a pitcher only or a 2A gets the pitch that day if they choose to do so, right? Mm-hmm. So for us, we have 2 a year. We have one in January, and then we have what we call our August camp in August. We do that one over at the Boomba Sports Complex is what we have traditionally done it in August. We've been able to that. So that's traditionally where we do it in August. We're able to kind of have a contract with them over the last few years to get it on that weekend. And that just helps just because all the fields are in one place. What we do in January for the games on Sunday is we just get 3 separate sites, and we just put the 3 grad classes all at a different site, and we just put our coaching staff up for, hey, if I'm coaching a 2022 team, I'm over with the 2022s for the games on Sunday at our January tryout.
Right on. Good. Well, listen, I think we got the pretty good intro to Power. We got a pretty good intro to Turn 2. We got a pretty good intro to Team Orlando. And between the 4 of you guys, there's some combination of there's 3 things that all you guys are involved with, but it's not one thing. There's still three distinct separate things.
Yeah, well, here's the thing with that. And that's just that's how most things are in any type of streamlining of business, right? Because Power is about trying to help kids place them in college. Some of the kids that are going through the draft process, right? And then first and foremost, what people need to always remember is be where their feet are, and just giving them a good experience to just play baseball as a high school kid, right? In summers. So, Turn 2 isn't about college placement. It's about, hey, you're trying to get bigger, faster, stronger. We're trying to help your skills on hitting, pitching, and defense, right? And then Team Orlando, right, is the youth side of it, to where it's not about recruiting, and it's more about practice, and let's try to play competitive games without going all over the country, because when I get older, the travel gets big, so when we're younger, let's try to stay a little more local and save a few pennies and just kind of get on the field as much as we can. So because the 3 businesses all have really 3 very different kind of driving forces on what they do, the 3 together become a network and an umbrella to where it's a one-stop shop. Yeah. But at the day, really, the a la carte services need to be different businesses because they really do have different purposes.
And I tell you what, we may be jumping the shark a little bit, because one of my sort of standard questions these days is trying to get some advice for these guys opening organizations and or facilities. So we may come back to this and expand on that a little bit more in a second. Speaking of these standard questions, let's jump into these and see where these take us. And they always tend to open up larger topics and bring more questions out of me. So let's just head to this first one. This is kind of a softball. I've been getting some interesting answers. I've gotten I keep asking for books, and people keep giving me non-books, which is totally okay, because as a guest told me yesterday, everybody learns a little bit different, and you know what? And listening to stuff and watching things is the perfect format for some of us. So I might say book here, but it doesn't necessarily mean book, I suppose. But with that in mind, what book do you think every coach should read?
I'll help you out here. It's a book, but there is a documentary version of it as well. I think Netflix actually has it. So it actually isn't related to sports directly. So it's called The Secret, right? Very, very popular book, right? Obviously turned into a documentary. So basically the Secret is just talking about something called the law of attraction, right? And it just talks about how we think evolves kind of creates action in our lives and actually can draw it to it, right? So if I can find a way to always find the best in a scenario or try to find the silver lining in something like that, do I then attract those things into my life? So, I mean, I think that right there is just a very important life skill and just life perspective, because that's going to affect everything in your life, which is going to be including baseball if you're a baseball player, if you're a coach, right? And, even more so as a coach, our job is to influence others. So, we have to make sure that us as coaches, that we are always we don't have any bad seeds inside of us, right? Because, that bad seed is going to grow into, a not so good plant or a not so good tree, right? Well, then, our players and these people that we're trying to invest in these families, they're trying to pick off of that tree that we're providing them, right? So if I'm providing them, bad fruit, right? Like, I'm not going to get the most out of them. I'm not going to help them grow and develop. So the clearer my head is, the more that I'm attracting, positive things. And when I say positive, sometimes a lot of that doesn't always mean everything's warm and fuzzy, right? Like, positive things are learning how to deal with adversity and giving them some life skills and, attracting those types of qualities. That's going to help me, kind of put that into our players, right? Put that into the families that I'm around to draw and attract some positive things to get them go towards their goal as much as possible. So I just think it's a life perspective and a skill that is transferable to everything in our lives, especially for somebody as our job as coaches is first and foremost to get the most out of the players. And I think to do that the most successfully, you have to invest in the person first and then the player second. Because if you invest if we have great people with great people skills and great mindsets, that's qualities that every successful player has. So that's really kind of the way that I kind of look at it, from a more broad perspective of a life skill to draw into what they're going to do on the field.
I looked it up when you first said it, The Secret from 15 years ago. I remember there was quite the buzz around it. And it's one of those things, I've seen that logo. I've seen it out there, the book and the movie 100 times, 200 times, 1,000 times. I don't even know how many times I've seen it. And now that you mentioned it and give it such a glowing review, I'm going to go check it out. So I appreciate that. Very cool. It's one of those things I've almost avoided it because I've seen it too many times, that had so much positive reviews. So, all right, out of your mouth and onto my Netflix queue. All right, next question. What regret or failure changed the way you coach for the better?
If I say I have a regret, then I might be not buying what I just sold in the law of attraction, right? So I'm going to kind of modify your question a little bit.
All right.
What silver linings have I had to find in hardships or areas that needed improvement when I reflect upon how I have either done things internally within our business or as a coach or, to players and families, has probably just been the biggest thing I feel like I've learned is really just rounding out the wheels a little bit, right? And just coming from a place of trying to remove emotions and be a little more objective and less subjective on any time I'm receiving, information or a conversation from a player or a staff member or one of my partners. Because at the end of the day, when, I'm a very emotional guy, right? Like I'm very, very intense. I'm a left-handed redheaded stepchild. I'll tell people all the time, like you can't be a calm guy with that combination, right? So I was born with some intensity. So with that, right, there's some positives that come with kind of the passion and personality that I have, but sometimes even it can come across, people can perceive that as negative, right? It can seem overwhelming. So I've kind of learned that, like, for me, because my emotions are so high, I need to almost create this like delay in my emotions, after I receive some information. And I feel like as I've started to learn how to just have a little bit of time and I purposely process it. It might even be just 10, 15 seconds of somebody initially telling me something, right? Before I start letting my emotions start to file in, like how much better I have been on getting across the intentions I have to our people accurately, right? And that's, I think, a huge piece of the puzzle, because I'm trying to help players be better, I'm trying to help them grow up. And even if I'm trying to give them some love or some tough love, if that's not how it's initially received, then I just lost all credibility, right? So, and then even more so internally, right, with my partners, like I talked about, we started this off and we have 4 chiefs, right? Like, we have to be able to speak at the round table very directly. And, with that, obviously there's going to be times, there were very few times that all 4 of us agree, right off the bat. So it didn't go very well when I let my emotions kind of fly when somebody disagreed and I felt adamantly about something, right? So I needed to be better at giving my partners more respect by, letting them speak their mind without getting so emotional. Is there
a certain technique or a certain thing that you're doing when because it's happening? You seem self-aware enough at your age that somebody's telling you something and you go, oh boy, here it comes. And then is there a thing or a technique you do in that moment are you just like, reciting the alphabet to give yourself, 60 seconds of calm? Like, what do you do?
I have, generally speaking, like I said, I try to use the idea of hear the message, not the tone. Right. I try to hear that, because it's funny how if you just remove any type of inflection in somebody's voice or anything, like, and it's just almost like data that you're like hearing or reading with no type of tone, how it's also very easy to respond in the same way. Right. So I really am trying to remove any emotions from the beginning. And then also more specifically, I basically have different hats that I put on, right? So if I'm talking to a parent, okay, I just already know and accept that, if they're talking about their kid and you're in a business dealing with somebody's kid, like that's something they care nothing. They care more about
it's literally the most important thing in their life.
Right, exactly, right? So sometimes their emotion, I always know that it comes from a place of they care about their kid, and sometimes their emotions are going to take them further, and it's because of that. But at the end of the day, it's because they care about their kid, and they want the best for their kid, and I do too, right? Mm-hmm. So by, anytime a parent starts to get a little emotional or fired up or whatever, I just try to remember we're pulling on the same end of the rope. Like, we both want what's best for your kid, right? So like that's kind of what I run through my head, right? So I have different things. So if it's our staff members, right, like where are we pulling on the same end of the rope, and what are we doing in that arena? As my business partners, like what are we doing pulling on the same end of the rope there? So I kind of conceptualize and almost put on different hats depending on who I'm talking to.
Yeah. That's good. I'll tell you, it's like was it G.I. Joe? No one's half the battle, right? Like just being self-aware of this is how old are you, man?
I'm 33.
You're a young pup. I'm 42 with a 5-year-old, and I feel like this is something that's starting to creep into my head, as this self-awareness of when you're starting to get frustrated. So now that I'm become aware of it, it's like I got to find that technique that works with me to simmer down, before I respond. So good stuff, man. I think just talking about this even makes me even more aware of it now. So Power Baseball is mostly Central Florida, the Orlando area. So I'm curious as to the answers to this next question. How much midweek practice are you guys doing, and is it team-based or individual-based? How do you guys approach those midweek?
that's the thing with high school travel ball, right? If you're on kind of the national stage, like we're fortunate to be on, the summer schedule is so saturated, and then also having kind of some national level players, especially as they get into really that 17U summer, there's so many things and other events that some of those guys have to be at, from whether it's a college exposure standpoint or a pro exposure standpoint that's kind of outside of our team schedule, that there's a lot of things that we kind of have to balance, right? So not only is it basically, we play 6 events in a summer from basically Memorial Day weekend to like the 3rd week of July, right? So, I mean, it's about an 8-week period to knock out 6 events, and some of these events are, 5, 6, 7 game minimum.
Yeah, they run into each other.
The schedule alone is just like exhausting, because here's the thing too, is like we're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old bodies. Like they go out there and play, 4 games in 3 days, and then we go out and practice. If we were even able to logistically practice for 2 days, and then we go back and we play 5 more games in 4 days, like they're exhausted. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't have, most of these kids don't have that mental capacity or the physical conditioning to be able to handle all of that. But the biggest piece for me is more the mental capacity side of it, right? So that's one reason logistically it can't happen. The other thing is, we do have some players from South Georgia to South Florida and everything in between. Now the majority of our program is, kind of from, about within a 90-mile radius of kind of smack dab in the middle of Orlando, right? So which we are proud of, right? That we are able to kind of have so much of our program kind of, be from really here in our hub. I think the more that the guys are around each other, the more they have things in common, like where they live, they have, there's a pride from where you're from, right? So I think that does help create another positive element, that some of the teams that do have players from all over the country, even though you might have more talented players, it's a little harder to have that kind of same camaraderie, in my opinion. I might be wrong, right? So that's just kind of one of the pros that we're proud of, being, kind of central.
I think camaraderie and just kind of knowing the people on your left and right is so important and so overlooked in some circumstances. It's incredible.
Yeah, there's no doubt, right? And in today's day and age, where I'm going to tell you, it's the timeless wisdom of, adapt or die is, in this day and age with social media, some of the pros, some of that stuff, some of these kids, like some of the guys that they consider their best friends do live in another state, because they're Snapchatting each other or FaceTiming every day, right? It really is the world we live in, which wasn't
wild.
As much 5 years ago, and definitely wasn't the case 10, 15, 20 years ago, right?
For sure.
So it's very interesting about how, I try to look at it as like, what are 15 and 16-year-old kids into? Like, and I want to know every 4 years, because about every 4 to 5 years it changes, right? So if you know how they're spending their time or what they deem as important or cool or whatever, right? Now we have a much better glimpse of how to connect with that human being, right? And like I said, that's one of the things now, is that it's just that, like, the whole, hey, I can have a best friend and I, see him physically once every 3 weeks is something that is present right now. So a little harder for maybe you and I to grasp our mind around, but I mean, I get it, kind of, being somewhat a part of this culture that we're in.
So different, man. So different. Hey, we're circling back to a topic we were kind of nibbling around the corners on earlier. So let's see where this takes us. What's the one piece of advice you'd give someone that's just starting a travel team or organization or opening up a facility? One piece of advice.
Yeah,
Don't have 3 other partners. I'm kidding. Jokes.
We've lots of experience with that, but no, there was definitely some complications with that, but we were able to get through it. Honestly, the biggest thing is, like, have core values and don't leave them, right? Like, do not leave them. And I can tell you, right, like, for us, when the 4 of us decided to go forward with this, the first thing we ever met about, talked about, wrote down was what do we want? And for one of our things was, we wanted every player in our program, whether they're the first player or the 200th player, right, to feel valued. right? To understand that they have a role, either short and or long term, potentially in our program, right? And how do you make that happen, right? So another part of to be able to do that is that another core value have was to be very, very honest and direct, because one player that is potentially a draft pick, it's pretty easy for him to feel valued, right? He's getting the red carpet laid out for him all the time. But the guy that's not, is the last guy put on a roster, or hasn't had a significant amount of success, or currently isn't a college baseball player but is trying to turn himself into one. Like, you have to show them, you have to be honest with them that this is not your ceiling, but this is, and that's awesome too, right? And this is, and like, so, but you can't compare to the guy that's going to be the draft pick. You have to take an incredibly different journey, because you're going to a different destination. So, those were two of the things that were huge with us, which was like, we're going to make sure our people, we want to give them a personal service. We kind of call ourselves in a business metaphor is, we try to be like Chick-fil-A, not like Walmart, right? Like there's a million Walmarts around the country, but you go to, 10 different Walmarts, you might have 10 different experiences, to where Chick-fil-A is much more selective on how many locations and where they are, but it doesn't matter what Chick-fil-A you walk into, you're going to get greeted the same way. It's going to smell the same. It's going to look the same. It's going to have the same vibe and same feel, right? Or similar vibe. And that's what we wanted to do, is that it doesn't matter what team you're on in our program. It's going to be competitive. It doesn't matter what team you're on in our program. You're going to provide a role. You're going to provide a value, and whatever that is, we're going to be honest and upfront with you about what that role and that value is. And if you don't like that, that's okay. We want to help you find somewhere else where you do want to go in a different direction if that's not us. But at the end of the day, we're always going to be honest and upfront with our people.
Huge. I used to really get kind of, I don't know. I didn't love the big organizations that had 7 teams at an age group, and then I just realized, like, listen, that kid's going to play somewhere, right? So he's going to go somewhere. So why not at this particular organization? And for me, it's just like, hey, if as long as that family and that kid on the G team understand sort of what's going on, and the coaching staff has been upfront and honest, and there's transparency. I mean, I could care less if there's 25 teams in an age group.
Man, I think that's one of the biggest things. And if anybody listens to even one snippet of this podcast, I really hope they listen to this piece to it, because that's the biggest thing that families need to realize is, like, what are your core values and what are you wanting to get out of this, right? And is that realistic for what your son, or if you're the player, is that a realistic journey and destination for you, right? So, like, they have to find those answers out, because that's where the people that I've seen are unhappy. Is like, look, like, we have our model, and some of our competition does have, some people, like, literally 100 or more teams than what we have, right? Like, that doesn't mean they're doing something wrong. It's something different.
It's different,
and that's important in any market, right? Like, it is very important in any market to thrive to have different models and different services, right? Like, it is super important. What if every restaurant in the entire world sold nothing but hamburgers and chicken fingers, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it is very important. The problem is families think they know what they want, or they want something that's unrealistic. That's like to the burger shop, and they're really upset that they don't have, orange chicken or Chinese food, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, you just came to a burger place. How are you so upset and throwing a fit that Chinese food on the menu, right?
I love it.
That's your fault for walking into a place and expecting something different than what they provide, right? So, like, that's the biggest thing, to where, like, a lot of these families feel like they're like so stressed, or we've had all these terrible experiences, and then they start knocking the entire market. It's like, is it that, or is that you just either didn't have the right amount of information, have some blinders on for what's reality, maybe weren't someone wasn't honest and upfront with you, right, about things, right? Like, or like, that's where I want to challenge people to do the homework. Like, I don't think every player is right for power baseball. I'm going to be honest with you, right? Like, I think if anybody tells you any different, they're a liar, right? You know what I'm saying? Because once again, there's not really 100% for everybody in anything in this world. So like, but I can tell you, do I think that we do a lot for most of the market? Absolutely. I think we do. But that doesn't mean that every player is perfect for us, right? And I don't want that to be the case, because if that's a monopoly of us, then we have no competition. Like, competition is important for us to survive and thrive, just like it is for our competitors. And the only way you have that is if you have different models.
Love it. Love it. Man, awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Hey, let's hit this last question here. And I have a feeling, just based on some of your last responses, I have a feeling you're going to have some opinions here. I'm going to give you the magic wand for a second, see what kind of magic you can come up with. What one change do you think could be made to travel baseball that would have the biggest positive impact?
I think the biggest positive impact could happen is actually in the hands of the customers, because it's everything that I just said. Mm-hmm. Get properly educated. The first step to that is families, players, parents. Stop coming to the table thinking that you know something. Like, come with a blank slate. Like, this is in travel baseball, this whole trying to get recruited into college or go, for those that are fortunate to go through the draft process, is an incredibly niche process. And it has changed every 4 to 5 years. Like, the draft 15 years ago didn't have a limit, right? 20 years ago, there was 65 rounds. People could just keep drafting. Then they changed it to 50 rounds. Now, look how this pandemic has kind of changed everything. Like, Dad, if you played college baseball 25 years ago, stop thinking you know something about what goes on in the current recruiting world, because it is incredibly different. Like, I'm 33 years old, fortunate enough to play at a program that was Division II my freshman year and transition in Division I my sophomore through senior year, right? Like, so I saw 2 different levels of college baseball in the Southeast, right? Like, how my recruiting happened is so incredibly different than the opportunities that these kids have right now, right? And like, how it works is so unbelievably different, and it keeps modifying and it keeps evolving and changing. So coming to the table as a family, as a parent, as a player, with these preconceived ideas that you know how this works. I don't even care if you have an older son who's been recruited before. Yep. It changes every few years. Yep. It's constantly evolving, adapt or die. So that's the families. I feel like, honestly, the travel ball industry, there's a lot of really positive things. These kids are getting opportunities and experiences that, like, man, like, every one of us that is not a high school baseball player right now, and those days are behind us, wish that they could have some of the training and some of the resources, all these things at our fingertips, and that we could have experienced as players, right? So there's so many positive things. Are there some things? Of course, nothing's ever going to be perfect, right? But I really think what's going on is super positive. I think that the gap that needs to be bridged is everything I've been talking about for the last 10 minutes, is the parents and the players and the families understanding what is truly important, specific to them, and then coming to the people that do this very niche thing for a living and are in the trenches to just allow someone to guide you and just trust. No, we're asking for a lot, saying trust us, but we're not in this for any reason other than we want to help kids achieve their dreams. That's what every single person that runs a travel ball organization, it has nothing to do other than, first and foremost, I want to help affect young baseball players' lives and careers in a positive manner.
Here's what I was thinking as you were describing that. If I'm a family right now, I would struggle to place 100% trust in one person, and they shouldn't. I don't think they should. Like, it's the kid's education at stake. Don't put it all in the hands of one guy. But building out a sort of like board of directors to sort of guide you through this and manage your process through this over the course of, say, For some families, it might be 12 months. For other families, it may be a 2 or 3 year process. Find people who've been doing this, have been in the trenches, currently in the trenches, and find a few of those people so that you can bounce ideas from one guy to the next. And if you're hearing the same thing from 4 different people, then you can feel pretty confident that information is on the up and up.
Yeah. So with that, I think talking to people within the same network is important, because here's the thing, right? Like I look, some people are all different, right? There are some people that are like, hey, there's just one guy and I just trust them, and they're the type of people that can trust one person and they have that level of trust and they hand it over. And other people aren't as trusting as that. And they want to kind of, get a larger, more third-party reviews and opinions. However, I do think it's important to get that from the same network. And that's another thing that the travel ball industry now does provide, is that we're kind of one of the smaller ones on the national scale. And we have 20-something staff members, right? So yeah, it's important. If you're a player in our program, pick the brains of your current coaches of coaching your current team. Pick my brain, pick Jesse's brain, pick, right? Because now you did talk to 4 or 5 different people, and because we stay true to our core values, and we tell our coaches, look, we want you to be honest with us, but if a player comes to you, don't sugarcoat it. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Be honest with him, right? So, and even if that's not 100% how we feel, for the most part, I don't think we've ever come across a scenario that one of our coaches felt so much different than as the ownership did, because there's a reason why they wanted to be on our staff, because there's some like-minded. But even within that like-mindedness group that we have, are there some varying opinions to some degree? Of course they are, right? And that is, once again, it's challenging, and it makes people better, right, internally within us, but then also these players. And that's exactly what you're saying. They need to find an organization that has the like-mindedness that fits for what their needs and potential realities are, and then need to start picking the brains of people within that network. You're going to find some patterns and some cohesiveness to which they can feel comfortable standing on as far as a plan moving forward.
For some reason, while we were talking about this, I was just thinking about the opposite, that family, that player, mom and dad, who have one person who's guiding them, except that one person is completely out to lunch. And we have a guy here locally who every time there's a halfway decent player that comes across, he tells that kid he's going to get that kid signed to UCLA. And I'm like, dude, that's 3,000 miles away. And there's not a single Division I program within 100 miles talking to this kid. But you're going to get him to UCLA. And oh, by the way, he's sent 0 kids to UCLA. And I'm sitting here laughing because I'm like it's funny, except for every year there's a couple kids who think they're going to UCLA from here because this guy every single year is feeding them a line of garbage. And do the opposite of what those families are doing. Find yourself a core group of people who can steer you in the right direction and actually are in the trenches and have current experience. Yeah, I'll tell you more about that guy offline. But Brian, this has been fast, and it's been a lot of fun. I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have any sort of, any parting shots or anything we didn't get to that you want to get off your chest? Anything that's worth saying that if anybody's still listening to us?
Man, I just reiterating, beating a dead horse of kind of what I'm talking about is with the families, and just understanding that just keep making sure that you get properly educated. And the first step to that is having a blank slate without any demands or preconceived notions of where you think you fit in the market, right? I really think that, if you polled every single person, Rich, that has been on this podcast, in the travel ball industry, I think if there's one thing we would all agree on is, man, the families that just communicate, but also actually listen without trying to filter their own desires, they have the most enjoyable journey and are most satisfied and humbled by the final destination of how everything panned out, right? Like, I think everyone in the travel industry would agree with that. So, like, that's what I hope that people listening to this understand, is that, like, find people you respect and have a trust level with, come with zero agendas, come with a blank slate, buy in. You're not going to have regrets at that point. You really honestly won't.
Beautiful. That's a great spot to end it. Let me stop the recording. Hang on the line for a second.